I wasn't invited, not this year, not the year before, and for about 10 years now, I've felt my name quietly disappearing from the page, as if it were being slowly erased, leaving no trace. It wasn't a resounding breakup, but rather a series of small omissions and forgotten calls that, over time, added up to a palpable void. The letter arrived on Tuesday, short and with an overly bright subject line. As if someone were trying to hide a knife behind a smile. Whitmore Family Vacation 2025, confirm. By Friday, the tone seemed genuinely cheerful, desperately wanting to seem warm, but there was already a chill in it that I felt all over. I knew it even before I clicked open, and yet I did. Sometimes you want to see exactly how you were excluded, to understand how deeply it was done. The letter window opened to reveal photographs, and everyone was there. Camilla, of course, her husband, their 2 children, Aunt Janine from Savannah, Uncle Roger with his ridiculous fishing hat, which he seemed proud of and wore to every family event, even if she laughed with him in a special way. Even Cousin Lily, the same one who once stole my prom dress and denied it with a stony face, was in the pictures. Everything was aglow with lanterns and sandy beaches, but there was no me, and there wasn't even a typo in my name, no Carla or Clara, just a blank space where the youngest daughter's signature should have been, and that blank space seemed intentional to me. Such loss doesn't begin with a scream, but with a constant, quiet hum, like a refrigerator in the background, which you long ago stopped noticing, until one day you notice it's gone, and the silence itself seems dangerous. So it was here. The exception didn't come suddenly, it hummed nearby for a long time, and then made me realize I wasn't there. I was sitting in my Santa Monica office, surrounded by glass, deadlines, diplomas, and the small trophies of a career I'd built against all odds. I had a corner view I'd earned through hard work, but the room was cold, and even the California sun, gloomily filtering through the blinds, couldn't warm what had formed inside. I looked at the email again, then at my name, at that emptiness, as if it had never belonged to me. I almost closed my laptop, almost, but I didn't dare, because something made me open a new tab. I typed in the name of the beach house where they always held the retreat. A spacious whitewashed house on the Georgia coast with a porch swing and twinkling lights. The place where I'd last heard my father laugh before he had a stroke, and the scene was heavy and fuzzy in my memory, like an old movie. A new listing popped up on the screen, not for rent, but for sale, and the lines of the ad read like a death sentence: price reduced, seller motivated, case pending. There was no group text, no call, not even a just so you know message. I read every line, and when I recognized the agent's name, the same woman who used to handle my grandmother's estate, I felt the air in the room shift, as if someone had quietly closed the door and pulled me out of the scene without a word. They were getting rid of the house as silently as they had gotten rid of me. I didn't explode with anger. At first there was surprise, then a cold determination, and I closed the tab and turned to the bookshelf where a turquoise shell lay, a gift from my father when I was 9. He'd pressed it into my palm and said with a slight grin, "You think of the ebb and flow of the tides, Clara, never let them make you smaller." And his voice came back to me, soft and firm at the same time, like a lighthouse that flickers from time to time in the night when you don't know which way to swim. In that moment, an idea was born, simple and brutal. They might erase my name from the invitations, but I still remembered how to address the envelopes and how to reclaim my place at the table if I had the courage to demand it. The problem with erasure is that no one tells you it's happening. It starts drip by drip, one missed call, one family photo without you, one seat at dinner left empty with no one bothering to ask where you are. At first, I tried to be the one who gives in and connects. Sending Christmas gifts, posting on that group thread when my name was still there, flying home for Thanksgiving even when the ticket cost more than my then current rent, offering to help mom with the mortgage when Camille's sons had new needs, paying for a braces consultation because I knew it would be a relief for her. I did what a youngest daughter should do: show up, say little, and be helpful, but helpfulness tired of being enough. Camille always skillfully commanded the spotlight. Radiating warmth, looking perfect in every photo, speaking loudly and confidently, and in that sense, she was called charming. Camille always lived as if the world were her stage, turning even the simplest moments into events. She threw baby showers with signature cocktails and music chosen so carefully as if her personal image was at stake. She designed homecoming t-shirts and everyone praised her creativity as if it were genius. And she once called me from Michael's, where the shelves were lined with fabrics, candles, and endless decor options, just to ask if I preferred turquoise or coral for the beach house table. Setting: I remember being silent for a second, trying to figure out if it was a meaningful call, an invitation, but then I finally answered, "I don't think I'm coming this year," and she, without a moment's break in her light, friendly tone, said, "That's okay, Clara, we'll save you a plate," but of course, no plate was left for me. After our father's stroke, I flew alone, barely managing to get a ticket, and sat by his bedside while Camille was too depressed and Mom couldn't stand the sight of the pipes and wires that made him look like a stranger. I spoon-fed him, read aloud to him from his favorite Steinbeck, trying to keep his eyes open, and when he finally spoke again, weeks later, his voice trembled, as if he were a child and not my father. "You came that winter, and that's when I asked Mom about the inheritance, not for the money, but to understand what would happen to the house, the bills, that trust fund he'd once mentioned." She gave me a tight smile, put her hand on my shoulder, and said, "Camille and I will take care of everything, don't worry, your pretty head." After that, I stopped asking questions. The last time I finally decided to come to the beach house, the spare key was gone. Camilla said on the phone they'd changed the locks after a break-in, but I'd never heard any break-in, and her story sounded as implausible as her forced cheerfulness. From then on, I started skipping holidays, sending unanswered cards, and stopped correcting them when they wrote on Facebook that I was too busy or distant, as if my life was a convenient excuse for their silence. I remember one day my mom posted an old photo of Camilla and Dad sitting on the beach at sunset, and everyone commented on how cute they looked together, but I remembered that photo better than any other, because I was the one who took it. I was there, off camera, with sand in my hair and the sun beating down on my shoulders, and it was my hand that pressed the button, but I was no longer in the picture, cut out as easily as deleted from a chat. That year, I stopped sending gifts, but I didn't stop watching, and that was the worst part. Savannah, my former neighbor and now a legal assistant, slowly became my eyes and ears, seeing the occasional conversations, screenshots, and random snippets of emails from which I'd been deleted. "They think you'd disappeared," she said one day, looking at me intently, but I just shook my head. "I haven't disappeared, I've been waiting," and it was true. Sometimes the ones who erase you the quickest are the ones who most fear the moment when you'll return and remind them of yourself, and I began to understand that all this time, they hadn't forgotten me. They were afraid. When I saw the house listed for sale, I didn't buy it out of revenge. I did it because I was tired of pretending my absence was just a mistake, an accident, a technical glitch. The listing had been up for only 13 days, and no one had changed it. No big posts, no family chat messages, just a quiet link in a real estate newsletter that I almost deleted along with the rest of the spam emails. The house was no longer registered under the Whitmore name. It had been transferred to an LLC Camilla had created, probably right after her father's death, to keep everything under control. I knew the language, having lived by corporate strategy and seen such tricks hundreds of times at work, but there was no anger, only a calm, methodical decision. I printed out all the documents, called a friend who specializes in property law, and met with Savannah that evening. She typed the name into a search engine and within 10 minutes found something we weren't expecting. My father's original trust contained a clause directly related to me, a recourse clause. If the estate had been insolvent, if tax returns had been missed, if the insurance had expired, or if necessary disclosures had been made, the secondary beneficiary, me, would have had every right to transfer the property. The taxes had been paid, the insurance was in effect, but something had slipped through the cracks, not negligence, but plain laziness and arrogance, and that opened a door they hadn't even considered closing. Camilla and Mom probably thought the house would remain in limbo, half used and half empty, until they decided what was best for them, but Dad had once wisely left a back door, and that door was now open, just for me. Savannah's voice, calm and slightly restrained, sounded like both a sentence and a salvation. "If you want it, Clara, it's yours, there will be no struggle." I couldn't answer right away because I was looking at the turquoise shell that had been sitting on my table all this time. Intact despite the years and distance, I remembered Dad brushing the sand off it and placing it in my palm, as if passing on a sacred relic, and saying, "We think in ebbs and flows, Clara, not in waves, you will come back stronger." And in that moment, His voice from the past seemed to wash over me with warmth. That evening, I opened a blank spreadsheet and laid out everything I owned: my finances, stock options, liquid assets, modest savings accumulated over years of careful discipline. I wasn't a rich woman, as Camilla liked to think when she talked about my brilliant career in California, but I had something I'd built, safe, stable, and mine. 2 days later, I called the listing agent. She didn't immediately recognize my name until I said quietly but firmly, "Whitmore, Clara, Thomas's daughter." There was a pause on the other end, and then only a soft, "Oh, you're different." Yes, I was different. I signed the purchase documents, taking advantage of the fallback position: no press, no ads, no family emails, and then, as if continuing what I'd started, I opened the booking portal and reserved the master suite, 3 nights, check-in Friday. I listed the guest's name as Miss S. Whitmore. Under preferences, I wrote, "Please place a bottle of Perrier Jouet on ice. Guest prefers firm pillows, cotton sheets, and complete privacy." When the confirmation arrived, I didn't smile or cry. I simply sat motionless and listened to my heartbeat. They'd removed me from the invitation, and I'd just added myself to the agreement. I'd arrived early, not to greet anyone or to make a scene, but simply to see the house one more time, before their hands touched it. While it still breathed the memory of my father, the house seemed smaller than I remembered, or perhaps it was I who had grown larger, older, heavier with all these years. The porch swing was still slightly askew, the shutters needed painting, someone had replaced the old headlight with a cheap solar bulb, but the house still stood, as if waiting for my return. Gently breathing in the ocean breeze, I went inside without stopping, checking the champagne. It was properly chilled, the sheets were neatly tucked in, and my name was listed correctly in the guest book, with a K and not some other spelling. I left, parked 2 streets away in a rented sedan, and waited. At 6:42 p.m., Camilla's white Audi pulled up smoothly. Her husband was the first to emerge, fussily hauling out luggage. Then the children darted out, already arguing, their voices drowning out each other. Camilla was the last to arrive, wearing large sunglasses perched high like an old woman afraid of the light. And her gait was slow and theatrical, as if she were still strutting down the runway. Next came Mom, sitting in the back seat of Uncle Roger's SUV, wearing a white beachwear set, a strand of pearls around her neck, no makeup, just a hint of pink lip balm, the uniform of a Southern woman preparing to smile and politely decline. They rolled their bags toward the porch, laughing and chatting, children running across the walkway, Camilla loudly barking out instructions, and it all seemed like a familiar performance until they reached the reception desk, and then everything suddenly stopped, as if someone had turned off the sound in a movie. The front desk clerk, a young woman with a short haircut and an apologetic smile, spoke as if she were announcing the weather, her voice flat and devoid of any personal sympathy. "I'm sorry, but neither of your names are on the guest reservation. Are you part of Ms. Clara Whitmore's party?" Camilla blinked, her expression frozen in confusion, and my mother leaned forward slightly, as if she hadn't heard. "I'm sorry, whose party?" Camilla repeated, her voice wavering for a moment. "Ms. Clara Whitmore. She's fully booked," came the reply, and that name, my name, landed in the room with a heavy, ringing sound, like glass shattering on tile. The silence that followed wasn't the kind that awaits a continuation of the conversation. It was different, deaf, viscous, reshaping the very space. At that moment, I opened the car door and stepped out, not for the drama, not for the applause of an invisible audience, but because the time had come. I stepped inside, feeling a solid foundation beneath me, a calm, even confidence, my heels clicking loudly on the tiled floor, every movement echoing. I didn't look at Camilla, I didn't need to. I turned to the clerk. "I can clarify, my name is Ms. Whitmore, the paperwork was completed 2 weeks ago." I noticed Camilla turned sharply, her face tense, and her voice cracked a little higher than usual. "You bought the house?" I nodded. My mother's voice was quieter, almost a confused whisper. "But why do you need this, Clara?" I looked at her without anger, without coldness, simply finality. "Because I was never invited, but I never disappeared either." Camilla stepped closer, her fingers clenched into a fist. "You think this is funny? You think ruining our family trip will prove anything?" I shook my head and said, "No, I decide." I handed the clerk my ID and added, "Anyone not on my guest list, please politely escort them out, but don't be strict, they're my family." The clerk hesitated, then nodded. Behind me, no one said a word, not Camilla, not Mom, not Uncle Roger, who stood with his hands in his pockets. The silence did the talking for me. Let them explain to each other. Let them say my name among themselves. They turned and walked away from the reception desk in silence, without shouting, without making a scene, just with tense shoulders and a long line of silence that trailed behind them like smoke from a campfire. I didn't smile or wait for parting glances. I didn't need that. Now they knew. That was enough, or so I thought. The next morning, I saw from my window a news vehicle pull up to the house, a white van with blue lettering on the side, parked just beyond the hedge. A man in a button-down shirt, his hair slicked back and glistening with too much gel, stood in front of the camera, holding a microphone. He squinted and spoke into the camera as if reporting a major scandal, and the wind blew his tie, adding to the theatrics. I didn't answer the door, but as soon as the story aired, my phone went off like a fire alarm, text messages, emails, notifications, calls from people I hadn't heard from in years. Is this true? They asked. Did you really take your family home, exploiting a legal loophole, while your father was ill? The headline on the website was bold and yellow. Daughter uses trust clause to cut off family's right to inherited property. They made me look like a predator in heels and a business suit, a woman coming to finish off the already wounded. The article quoted a close relative who claimed my father had memory problems and had been tricked into signing the papers. They didn't name him, but I knew whose work it was. Camilla had always been good at using sympathy as a weapon, feeding people stories tinged with tragedy, making her look helpless and me look cruel. I sat with it. I didn't cry, I didn't write a statement, I didn't call reporters, because it was all too familiar. Instead of responding to a world that had suddenly decided to label me a monster, I dialed Savannah's number. One word, no explanation. Time. She didn't ask again, didn't look for excuses or long introductions, just answered briefly. Understood. I promised to send the file in 15 minutes. And exactly that time later, her name appeared in my inbox along with an attachment, a neatly compiled archive containing meticulously organized, dated screenshots of messages between Camilla and my mother. Each line of text was like a punch to the chest. Don't worry, Clara won't come anymore. She only thinks about herself. She's too busy proving herself to think about family. Don't be upset if you exclude her. She's used to it. The words were written lightly, but behind them lay an icy intent, a desire to erase me as if I'd never existed. The archive also contained audio files, one of them a recording of a conversation over family dinner, where someone had carelessly turned on speakerphone. Camilla's voice was clear, almost shrill. Clara was always too fragile to survive in this family. Let her rot in her apartment. It only made things easier for us. I listened and kept the file open, letting the words corrode the air in the room. Because it was in this naked cruelty that their truth was revealed. But the most important was a video taken 2 summers ago, which I cherished like a relic. In the recording, my father was sitting on the back porch, his legs swaddled in an old blanket, and in his hands he held the chipped mug from which he always drank in the mornings. I was sitting nearby, slightly to the side, just out of frame, and only my shadow occasionally glided over his shoulder. His voice was quiet but confident. I want this place for Clara. Camilla does everything loudly, and Clara takes a long time. I hadn't watched the recording since the day we made it. I saved it for those times when truth can be the only weapon, and this was precisely that time. The next morning, I downloaded all the materials to a secure drive, adding no commentary or byline, only a short message. Here's the full story. Decide what matters. I sent the link to only one reporter, a man I trusted. The one who had written an honest and brutal article years ago about elder abuse and inheritance disputes. I didn't need sensationalism, I just wanted the truth to be told. The video didn't go viral, and it didn't need to. By midday, the original headline on the website had disappeared, replaced by a quiet, matter-of-fact correction that almost no one noticed. But I watched as my inbox suddenly slowed down, messages stopped pouring in at a frantic rate, and calls began to fade. And that evening, when the only sound in the house was silence and the roar of the ocean, Savannah texted me a short message, 3 words, "They're quiet, ready?" I looked out the window at the black sea shimmering in the moonlight, its calm, endless surface, and replied, yes. The courthouse smelled of dust and disinfectant, scents that immediately bring you back to reality, to a system where every movement is recorded. I arrived before everyone else, without an entourage, without a lawyer in an expensive suit, just myself and a folder under my arm, in which I'd tucked everything they'd never expected to see. I was wearing a sea green dress, and I remembered how my grandmother had once called me Iron Will. Laughing but respectful, when I walked in, Camilla was already seated at the desk, her white pantsuit impeccable, but her lips were pressed into such a tight line they seemed fit for cutting paper. She didn't look at me, but I noticed her fingers tapping the phone in a quick, nervous rhythm. My mother sat next to me, her back too straight, the pearls around her neck trembling with each breath. She met my eyes only once, and the glance was so fleeting I could have imagined it. The clerk read the case: Whitmore v. Whitmore, petition for an injunction against a disputed estate, a claim for undue influence and elder abuse. Their lawyer stood up first, sleek, tanned, too young to remember anything more than quick wins. His speech was carefully constructed: intent, vulnerability, caution. He called me peaceful, pausing between words as if drawing them out to impress the courtroom. I listened calmly. When my turn came, I stood unhurriedly, without theatrical gestures, only with the truth in my hands. Your Honor, I would like to present video and audio evidence directly related to the trust and my father's clear intentions. The judge nodded, his glasses sliding down his nose as the bailiff dimmed the lights. My father appeared on the screen, wrapped in an old blanket, his face calm, his voice clear. I want Clara to have this seat. Camilla makes everything loud, Clara makes things last longer. She's the only one who came after the fall, the only one who didn't ask for anything. He paused, then looked directly into the camera and said, "This isn't about justice, this is about memory." I watched the courtroom. Mama blinked too quickly, the pearls around her neck trembling more noticeably. Camilla's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed. Then the audio file played, her voice, harsh and angry. Clara was always too fragile. Let her rot in her apartment. She was never part of this family. She should be easy to control. And that voice, torn from the dinner table, rang out in the echoing silence of the courtroom as if it revealed the entire truth they had spent years trying to hide. A silence fell, not the deafening silence that comes when walls collapse, but a different, resigned silence, as if everyone present suddenly realized the battle was over and no further words were necessary. The judge leaned back and tapped his pen on the table twice, each sound as firm as a stone set in place. His voice was even, unwavering. The court finds no basis for granting the motion. The evidence confirms the decedent's clarity of mind and clear intentions. The plaintiff's language suggests an exception, not a misunderstanding. He removed his glasses, looked over them directly at Camilla, and quietly added, "This court does not heal emotional wounds, it enforces the law. And in this case, the law is clear." He slammed his gavel. "The motion is denied." Camilla rose abruptly, her hands clenched into fists so tightly her knuckles turned white, but she didn't move a step, just stood there, rooted to the spot. My mother remained seated, her eyes glassy, dry, almost dead, and the pearls around her neck stiff. I gathered my folder and headed for the exit, not allowing myself to turn around, because I knew there was nothing left behind to hold me back. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps. One microphone suddenly shot forward like a spear, and half a question escaped the lips of a young journalist. "Is there anything you'd like to say to your family?" I paused only for a moment, letting silence fill the space, looked directly into the camera, and replied, "No, I already said that," but I spoke more quietly than usual and immediately moved on, without pausing, without throwing out loud words. When I returned, the house was empty and quiet. There were no suitcases on the porch, no voices echoed in the rooms, no harsh remarks, only the ocean outside continued its eternal breath, and the wind barely stirred the shutters. Inside, everything looked the same, but it seemed brighter, as if someone had removed an invisible burden from the walls. Noise, alienation, denial. I walked slowly, my hand brushing the wooden railing, smoothing a corner of the carpet in the hallway, letting the silence tell me what remained with me and what was gone forever. In my father's study, and even earlier, my grandmother's, I opened the bottom drawer of the old desk, the very one that no one had ever bothered to empty. Inside was a hanging musical toy we'd once made together, shell strung on fishing line, the blue thread with a frayed loop, and on one of the largest shells, my scrawled childish handwriting, the letters CW, scrawled when I was 9. I sat upright on the floor, cross-legged like a child, and carefully began to unravel it. I wasn't trying to make it look new and perfect, I simply fixed it the best I could, because some things don't need to be perfect to be important. When Savannah arrived, she brought wine and a roll of paper towels. "You didn't think I'd let you win without making me clean the windows, did you?" she said, smiling, and there was a warmth in her smile that takes your breath away. We worked silently, wiping the glass, brushing away dust, as if washing away not just the dirt but also years of neglect, erasing them to footnotes in someone else's story. Toward sunset, I hung the wind chime outside the kitchen window, and it caught the first gust of wind as if it had remembered how to dance. Its ringing was soft but clear. Later, we sat on the porch, two women with glasses in hand, watching the sun fall into the sea. "What now?" Savannah asked. I looked at the horizon, where the sky was slowly darkening, and said, "They said I was gone, that I was drifting, but I never went anywhere, they just decided not to meet me." We didn't raise our glasses, didn't toast, didn't celebrate, we simply sat and listened to the sea move like breath, and then I got up and started turning off the lights in the house, room by room, doing it for the first time not as a guest, but as a hostess, from the inside. And if this story has touched something quiet inside you, something you haven't spoken about for years, know this: you're not alone. There are more of us than you think, people who weren't invited back, who were written out of their own history. We never left, they simply never called us back, and this time, silence didn't win.